Lisa Daly and Lori Goodwin are the Recovering Preacher's Kids. Sit back and relax as they have an unfiltered conversation because let's face it, somebody's just got to say it. And welcome back to the Recovering Preacher's Kids podcast. I am so glad that y'all have decided to join us today as we open the door and jump down the rabbit hole of being a believer and a follower of Christ with anxiety following behind us. Anybody else feel that way? The more that you run towards Christ, the more anxiety is running behind you, like, wait for me, wait for me. I would like to tell y'all that I am the least anxious person. Nothing ever causes me to feel anxious and I have it all together, but I'm technically, y'all know the cat at Christmas that's all wrapped up in the Christmas lights and it says, I'm fine, everything's fine. That's me. I'm like the cat in the ball of wire. And I recently heard someone say on a podcast that you are not anxious, you are having an anxious moment, like be careful not to place that on you and say, I am anxious. And that kind of stuck with me. And so I've kind of been listening to different things and watching some different podcasts about anxiety because it is something that I'm trying to tackle and do better about. I would love to give credit where credit is due, but I literally cannot remember what podcast it was that I heard this on. So I apologize for not giving the credit. But this person said that where you run in crisis is where you will find your Christ. Because we are called to cast our cares upon Christ and cast our cares upon God and to run to him and to seek his face. But if we run to other things, people, situations, when we're in a moment of crisis, when we're having these anxious thoughts, hey, that's a thermometer. That's your Christ because we should be running to Christ. And that kind of really hit me hard. And so I think that the world does a great job of talking about anxiety. I feel like the church does a poor job about talking about anxiety because when you start talking about having an anxious moment in the church, you are met with, well, you just need to trust God. You need to. And I'm like, well, sister, what you need is to step back because I just might throat punch you. Because I started this conversation with, I am anxious. So obviously I am not in a good place at this moment, but isn't that true? We don't talk about this. We don't talk about anxiety in the church.
And I think it comes from, I was asking the ladies I work with a little bit. I told them we were getting ready for this podcast. And, I talked about that I struggle with anxiety. And I'm like, I want to know, do y'all do? What are your triggers? What makes you anxious? And we talked about it a little bit, and I'll come back to that. But I go, well, do you have a problem with that, with being told from the church, as soon as you bring it up, we hear, well, you're not supposed to worry. We're told not to worry. Where Jesus preaches, where's it in Matthew when he says, look at the flowers of the field, don't my Father? And we're quick to quote that passage, or in Philippians when we're told, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, every situation, submit and pray about it. And I'm constantly met with those verses, which are good verses. But then what happens to me is I shame myself in saying, well, see, you're not much of a Christian if you're worrying. You're not trusting that everything's going to be okay, or trusting God. So it's a cycle for me. I get anxious, and then I quoted those verses. I come to shame. Well, then I become anxious because I'm not trusting God. So therefore, am I really a good Christian? Isn't that a crazy circle?
Which makes me anxious.
Anxious, right?
Well, and I think that, and I have to be careful because at the end of the day, I too have quoted those scriptures to people.
Yeah, I have too.
I have quoted them. And so I have to be careful I'm not being judgy Judgerson and saying, oh, people have done this because I've done the same thing. And I find it interesting that do other people's anxiety make you anxious? And so
Yes,
I,
because I
I,
can't fix it.
I was thinking the other day about wonder if my response when someone comes to me about anxiety and I give them the church response, is it because their anxiety makes me anxious? And then I don't know what to do with it because I'm a fixer. And if you come to me with a problem, I have chosen it is now my life mission to fix your problem.
Yep. Yep.
And I add things to me because I want to fix your problem. So now I'm anxious because you're anxious and you're not even anxious anymore.
Yep. It was
You
just a
know,
fleeting moment. Yep.
but like you said, but it's because I'm on the vicious wheel. I'm on the vicious cycle. And if I can remove your anxiety, well, then you're okay. But then I'm in the wheel of now, yeah, I'm like the gerbil. Like, I don't know when to get off.
Yeah. That's a good example because that's exactly the way I feel, and I do the exact same thing, especially when it comes to my children. If they get to talking about something that they're having an anxious moment or whatever's going on in their life that's causing this anxiety, and I've used the verses too, and I've used the verse that everything works out. God works all things out for those who love the Lord, in Romans. And see, I can quote the idea, but just don't ask me for the address of it. But I do the same thing, but then I do that. I take it on and I start going, okay, now how can I help them fix this? I wish things would work out. I just add that to my anxiety and my anxious thoughts and all the conversations in my head and all the tabs like we talked about the other day. That's one of the tabs that's open in my head, constantly running. And I don't know if that's just something that as women, I know men struggle with anxiety a little bit too. And I just think maybe it's a little different idea, but I don't know if that's just us as women, part of our DNA, not being anxious, but wanting to take on and fix as a nurturer, fix whatever is bothering somebody.
No, because I've always been like, is that because like trauma? Am I anxious because of different trauma things that I've been through and it's all reminiscent to that? Or is it, see, I've never thought about, is it because God instilled this in me as a nurturer, but then Satan has taken it, twisted it. So,
Yeah.
what God instilled in me as a woman to be a beautiful attribute and a beautiful thing to nurture children and love other people, Satan has twisted it to the point that I'm the cat in the Christmas lights.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but now that you're bringing it out, yes, I do believe so because you sit and you talk to the number of women who talk about having anxious thoughts or dealing with or struggling with anxiety. And I mean, it's a majority of, I mean, when you listen to it, it is a lot of just because you're taking on more than what you can bear, more responsibility. You're absorbing because I'm bad about it. I'm bad about taking things on, which only leads more to the overwhelming leads to the anxiety. Do you believe so? Yeah.
Because
Interesting point.
it's and two, if I break down anxiety, like I have a physical reaction to it. I get myself in a moment of like, next thing you know, my chest hurts, my stomach hurts, my head hurts, Then I start with insomnia. I can't sleep. So now I'm tired. So now we have a headache and chest pains and stomach aches and I'm grumpy and then I can't eat and it becomes like this huge cycle of things and it begins to snowball.
Yeah.
But then let me sit that to the side. There might be little moments of I'm on my way to the doctor and my appointment's at 10 and I'm stuck in traffic and I'm going to be late and I'll find myself anxious about being late to the doctor. So it's not even just big
Yeah.
things. It's not the big, huge moments in my life. And I'm beginning to see that this is such an issue for me that I'm embarrassed to talk about. And I'm embarrassed to be like, hey, this is huge. But the world, in the world, you can find tons of people in the world to talk about anxiety about.
Yeah.
Because if you start talking to, someone at work or at Walmart or a doctor's office, and you're like, man, I was late to this appointment. I feel so anxious. They're like, girl, I get you. I'm telling you, I struggle with anxiety. Why is there such the difference, you think, between the church and the world honestly discussing anxiety?
Well, maybe we've hidden from it for so long and not named it what it is. And as you've been talking, I'm beginning to think there's different levels of it. We just talked about being part of our DNA, maybe as nurturers. One of the people I work with made the statement yesterday that their bottom line that they've come to realize from their anxiety, it's based in fear. And I was like, now that you say that, which can be the fear/trauma, but a lot of mine can come from, I think of all the worst case scenarios that could happen, and I go ahead and figure out a plan of how to combat that, which, leads the whole anxiety, the physical response you're talking about. But the basis is fear that I'm not in control and I'm not controlling the situation, which my counselor has talked to me about a little bit at the last session is why do I feel like I have to control everything? And I'm like, if I control everything, I know everything's going to be okay. As long as I know what's going to happen and I can take care of it. So that's why I have to think of all the worst case scenarios. Then I can take care of the situation. So it becomes a fear/control thing. Like, okay. So when she said that, I'm like, well, that makes sense. But then to get to the point that you're anxious because you're going to be late might be an underlying fear thing, but also is it part of people pleasing?
1,000%.
So I
1,000%.
guess there's different layers now I'm seeing of our issue with anxiety. And maybe it's just a topic in the church. We just don't know how to talk about it because if you're the good Christian person, you're not going to worry. You're not going to be anxious.
Is it possible that what we have bought into is the word anxiety because we don't bring to God, we don't lay before God the fear, lack of trust, I feel out of control. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
it's almost like, do you remember when, well, not that I didn't do it last week, let's just be honest, like when you're in trouble, whether it be at work or you've been caught red handed in something, whatever. And so you try to minimalize your participation in
Yeah.
whatever happened. I mean,
Yeah.
we do it as children, we do it as
Praise
adults,
God.
let's be
Yeah.
honest. Is it possible us just blanketing everything with anxiety? We're really minimizing what's going on. People pleasing. I want to control everything. I am fearful. I don't trust God. I mean, whatever it is, and just really being honest about the root of it. I'm reading this
Hmm.
book. It's actually about our bodies and your gut health is what it's about. But there was such a profound analogy in this book. He said, if you have a plant and the leaves are brown, you don't just paint the leaves green and say, my plant is green. You go and you look at the roots and you see what's happening with the roots and you treat the roots. And that is that image is what's coming to my mind as we're talking, because
Mhm.
what if our leaves are brown and we're just painting them green with the word anxiety? But the root is just this ball of all these other emotions, all these other sins, all these other struggles that we're keeping hidden in the dark and in the soul because we don't want to be honest about what the problem really is. Because if we're honest and then we have to take that before the Lord and confess it and be like, okay, God, this truly is what's happening in my life. We have to be honest with ourselves, but we have to be willing to accept what the Lord says back to us. And maybe we really, truly don't want to
Don't.
accept that.
Yeah. Hmm. Which brought to my mind that as you were talking, you think of Jesus, you know, he had all the emotions that we had, right? And I
Yes.
never really thought, and I do not want to label this, but if you remember the story of him going into Gethsemane, he talks about his spirit is distressed. I think that's the word it was used, but it's heavy, and because he goes in there because he was fixing to go to the cross. Well, that would definitely make me anxious.
And he
I
even
mean,
asked God, take
to
this
take
from
it.
me.
But that's the exact point that I think you're bringing out that I was fixing to say is, but he went to the garden and he brought it to God and says, "Is there any other way? But not
He
my
was
will, my."
honest.
Right. That just came to mind as you were using that as an example, and that's where we're falling short of being honest and naming it, but going to Him with it. But could it be? Because this is where I struggle a little bit. I don't pray very well. I don't
Oh,
know
I don't
how
either.
I don't know how to do that. So maybe that's part of our problem a little bit is the whole how do we communicate that?
Well, and I think we go to other people to communicate it versus God. And maybe the whole thing is we don't have to have this pharisaical prayer of my heavenly Father. Not that that's pharisaical. I shouldn't have said it like that. But I mean,
Right.
there's some times I think that if I don't go to God in this holy moment of reverence, that my prayer is not valid, I guess I should say. And that was embarrassing to me. And so I was trying to make it humorous and I just should have been honest. There we go. I just should have been honest from the get go of why I said it that way. But it's easier for me to go to you or a friend or my husband or whatever and just be like, I feel fearful of whatever the situation is. And it's like, well, I can say that to God. I could just say, God, I am fearful of this situation or I'm fearful of what's happening. But it's like because I can't see God, it's not like I'm just sitting down across from a table from Him. It's more like it's harder to say it that way because that's not this reverent holy moment, if that makes sense what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
No, exactly. Because that's what I think I struggle with. We're not sitting there with a cup of coffee, and not that I want to make it sacrilegious or something, but maybe that's what we need to, instead of saying, oh, okay, I need to pray for 10 minutes a day and try to cover everything in that one prayer. It's just throughout the day. If I have that response, just a very quick, hey, Lord, I'm struggling right here with whatever, and it's making me feel anxious, fearful, uncertain. Just like you were talking about a few podcasts back about having the conversations with him going down the road or whatever. And those are just
Yeah.
those are prayer. I mean, literally. I mean, that's a praying without ceasing, baby. That's just
Interesting that I'll share my day with him in that way. But when I'm struggling with fear, inadequacy, control, I think I have to approach him in this huge prayer. I wonder why I do that. That's interesting. That
just
that
know.
makes me want to like dive into my heart, like what is happening. The first thing that came to my mind right when I said that dive into my heart was because I don't want to truly admit it. Like it's okay for
Yeah.
me to say, God, this traffic's getting on my nerves, this, or whatever, but a deep rooted problem at the end of the day, I don't want to deal with it.
And I don't think we want to admit it because I think it goes back to what we were starting out with is the verses that we're met with. We don't think we're adequate enough, or, this shouldn't be a problem for us as a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it tells us not to be anxious. But we forget it said, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request. We forget that part. I just
Mm-hmm.
remember, well, I'm told not to be anxious. But it's like we're coming to the conclusion we needed the second part, though. We need to have just that quick conversation. I
Wow.
need to work on that.
My mind is just like a frenzy ball right now. It's funny to me how I complicate everything. I make everything
I do
so
too.
hard, and God's word is simple.
Yeah.
I mean, like you reading that, it was just like, hey, Lori, don't worry about it. Don't be anxious. So, but instead of being anxious, just talk to me about it. Like that is as simple as
Cool.
kindergarten as it gets. But I have made it this huge, hard thing. Like, I can't pray to God about my anxiety until Sunday morning during worship when the mood is right and the music is right. Do you see what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, I have chosen to do that, and that is not what it is.
Or even the fact that it's just kind of like I'm trying to hide it from him, like he doesn't even know I'm already anxious. Like, I do that. I'll just keep this to myself. That's just a part that I just need to keep to myself because I can't really let anybody see that part. Like, he don't ever already know that? Why do I forget that?
Ow, no words. You have rendered me speechless.
We need to write this date and time down. I have made Lori speechless. Well, that
I've
didn't come
never
from me, I guess.
never thought about that. The whole purpose behind it is I'm trying to hide it.
I'm a good hider.
I am too.
So I
I
feel
am
like that's
too.
the bottom line why I don't do it, and why I don't talk to him about it is just I just stuff that down. Well, that's not a good quality as a Christian, you know, so I'm just gonna stuff that down and I'll deal with that by myself.
Well, do you think too that if other people approach us about their struggles as we see ourselves in them, and so then we start quoting the scriptures back to them as if we're Christly saying, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up?
Probably. That's probably true, but also we're quoting them trying to remind ourselves, "You see, that's what you're supposed to know, that's what you're supposed to do." But yeah, I like that Christian way of saying shut up. Wow, see, we're just one big mess.
Truly, we are the cat in the Christmas lights. And I think that we have given allowed Satan, Daddy used to tell this story about a camel. He comes to your tent and he sticks his nose in the tent. And next thing you know, if you pet his nose, next thing you know, you've got the whole camel in a tent with you and you're sitting outside because there's no room.
Sorry.
But that's kind of how Satan works is it's like a little bit at the time. It's just
Yeah.
this little bit at the time. And as we've been talking and I, think back, kids aren't anxious. You know what I'm saying? Kids are just carefree. And my daughter has a huge island in her kitchen living room area. It's like a big open concept. And it's easy just to throw a towel up there and change the baby's diaper. He's 19 months old, on the towel without having to go in the room and all that. And so when you stand him up, if you open your arms big and wide, he'll just jump in your arms. There's no fear in him that he's not standing there being like, okay, is Gigi going to catch me? Is she really going to catch me? He just lunges off the bar. And so I think that over the years, like Satan, he just puts his nose in that tent. And little bit by little bit, it's almost like I have found myself sitting outside the tent, uncovered, unprotected, because I allowed the camel in the tent over a period of time. And so instead of just being like, okay, God, help me get this camel out of my tent, I'm out here sitting in the rain being like, oh, it's
But look where
raining.
I am.
Lord, it's raining on me. Could you stop the rain? Not, Lord, help me get the camel out of my tent. Lord, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, wow.
So in other words, what you're saying is a very good possibility that, yeah, when children start out, there's not this fear. They're just carefree. But you think about it over time, we have to teach them safety, and we have in
Absolutely.
some ways have we been taught, or are we teaching generations or other people this idea? I don't know
Well,
how to
no,
put my question. Not telling them we teach them to be anxious, but over time we've taught to be cautious and fear this and fear this. That's only developed amount. That's now we're seeing what's the fruit of anxiousness.
Well, and God instilled a righteous fear in us
Right.
for
Right.
a reason. I mean, think about the times that you're walking somewhere and someone's walking towards you and you get that feeling of, that person might not be safe. And so you veer off, or you don't walk down that dark alley, or you don't get on an elevator by yourself with that person. I mean, we have this godly fear in us that protects us.
And then I
God
have
instilled.
this crazy fear. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Okay, yes, that's to protect me. And then I have like this fear of, okay, every stick that's on my dirt road between here and the road while I'm walking is a snake. So I need to jump back or walk on the other side. And I get up there and it's just a stick.
Right. Well, and
It's
that's
an
what I think, that
overactive.
the enemy has taken that godly, God given in our nervous system, woven in our DNA, this fear to protect us. And we're so wound up, we don't know the difference between the telephone ringing and a bear chasing us. And so it's like, that's what I see that has happened with me
Yeah.
as I'm kind of working through all this, that it's more of I have done this
Mm.
through my adult life. I have done this. The choices I have made, the secrets I have hidden has pulled this camel into my tent so much that everything is a snake to me now.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, through all this, maybe our response needs to be when somebody comes and says, "Hey, I'm at an anxious moment." That it's maybe we remind them of, we're reminded not to be anxious, but to present. Say, "Well, hey, let's just have a quick conversation with God and let him know how you're feeling," is what we're learning from this. Or let's talk to him about, why don't you ask him what's the root of why you're feeling this way?
Yes.
What exactly is it? Maybe we can get to the bottom of it. Are you trying to fix something on your own? Are you fearful of something? Or you trying to control something or whatever? But to get to the root of it, and that through our conversation today, I think is the bottom line, is it's not us trying to be a better Christian by not being anxious and saying we don't need to talk about it, but reminding each other to, why don't we go to God and just tell him, "Hey, I'm anxious right now. This is bothering me. Why am I feeling this way?"
Because it's really not God and then us chasing after God and then anxiety chasing after us. It's really God, us chasing after God, and the enemy chasing after us.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure and like, follow, and subscribe. And also check us out at therecoveringpreacherskids.com.